At my sister's 300-guest wedding, my mother raised her champagne flute and asked, "So, when is it going to be your turn?" I said, "8 months ago. You were invited. Your favorite daughter forged a rejection letter in my name." The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was structural failure. The string quartet stopped mid-note. 300 crystal glasses hovered in midair, and my mother's smile, that perfect, practiced smile she reserved for public appearances, didn't just fade. It shattered. Beside her, my sister Chloe froze. Her hand went to her throat, her knuckles white against the silk of her custom Galia La Havre gown. She looked like a statue of panic. I didn't blink. I didn't tremble. I just held my glass and waited for the collapse. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community, ideal in steel beams, load-bearing capacities, and wind resistance. My sister, Chloe, deals in ring lights, filters, and engagement algorithms. For 29 years, I was the structural integrity of the family, and she was the curb appeal. My parents, Thomas and Catherine, were high-end real estate developers in the Hamptons. They understood value only as it appeared on a listing sheet. I was the utility room necessary, functional, invisible. Chloe was the oceanfront view. 8 months ago, I married Caleb. We didn't want a spectacle, we wanted altitude. We chose a ridge in the Rockies, 8,000 feet up, where the air is thin and honest. I sent 4 invitations via priority courier. I tracked them digitally until they were signed for at the family estate gate. On the day of the wedding, the wind cut through my lace sleeves. There were 50 guests wrapped in wool blankets, drinking hot cider. In the front row, 4 teak chairs sat empty. I had placed reserved signs on them. Mother, Father, Chloe. They looked like missing teeth in a smile. Caleb's jaw was tight enough to snap a bolt. He kept looking at the trailhead, waiting for a black SUV that I knew wasn't coming. Then, there was the letter. It had arrived the morning of the ceremony at our rental cabin. A large envelope, returned to sender. Inside wasn't a check or a congratulatory card. It was my own invitation, ripped open and shoved back in. Scrawled across the RSVP card in thick black marker were words that were supposed to be mine. "I want nothing to do with this toxic family. Do not contact me ever again." Caleb threw the paper onto the heavy timber table. He paced the room, his voice rising, furious at their cruelty, at their rejection on the most important day of my life. But I didn't shout. I picked up the card. I didn't feel the heat of anger. I felt the cool, clinical detachment of an engineer spotting a stress fracture in a foundation. I looked at the handwriting. It was a near-perfect mimicry of my own, the specific way I signed checks and blueprints, but the slant was exaggerated. The loops were performative. It was a caricature of my handwriting. It wasn't my parents'. My father dictates everything to assistants. He hasn't held a pen in years. My mother writes in cursive loops so tight they look like barbed wire. This was Chloe. She hadn't just thrown the invitations away. She had drafted a rejection letter, forged my hand, and presented it to our parents to ensure they wouldn't come. She had engineered my isolation to ensure she remained the only asset in their portfolio. She practiced my signature to delete me from the family ledger. I walked down the aisle an hour later. Tears were structural weaknesses I couldn't afford. I said my vows with the absolute precision of a contract being signed. I looked at those empty chairs and I didn't see a loss. I saw a liability being removed. That was the moment I stopped being their daughter and started being an auditor. And I knew, eventually, the audit would come due. For weeks after the wedding, I analyzed the silence. Why hadn't they called? If a daughter sends a letter saying she hates you, a normal parent drives to her house. They scream, they cry, they demand an explanation. My parents did nothing. They accepted the rejection with a speed that was almost efficient. That was when I finally understood the blueprint of a narcissistic family system. It wasn't just favoritism, it was structural engineering. My parents, Thomas and Catherine, had built their entire identity on the foundation of being perfect, successful, and envied. But perfection is heavy. It creates immense pressure. To keep the structure from collapsing, they needed a load-bearing wall to absorb all the toxicity, all the blame, all the failures. That was me. I was the designated scapegoat. I was the pressure valve. And they needed a golden child to project the image of success, to be the shiny facade that distracted from the rot inside. That was Chloe. They believed the forged letter not because it was convincing, but because it was convenient. It confirmed the narrative they had already drafted. Julia is difficult. Julia is ungrateful. Julia is the villain. If I was the villain, then their neglect was justified. If I was the one who cut them off, they were the victims. It was a perfect, self-sustaining loop. Chloe had simply handed them the permit to finalize the demolition of our relationship. So, I didn't send an email explaining the forgery. I didn't call to beg for their belief. Instead, I bought a plane ticket to the Hamptons. Caleb came with me, not as a guest, but as a witness. We weren't there to reconcile. We were there to conduct a final inspection before the condemnation. I walked into the reception tent on the oceanfront lawn. It was a glass-walled cathedral of excess, filled with white hydrangeas and old money. I wore a simple navy dress, blending into the background, just as I had been trained to do. I watched Chloe floating from table to table, basking in the adoration, playing the role of the blushing bride to perfection. Then came the moment. My mother found me near the bar. She didn't hug me. She didn't ask how I was. She just looked at me with that familiar, disappointed smirk and asked her question. So, when is it going to be your turn? And I answered, 8 months ago. You were invited. Your favorite daughter threw the invitation in the trash. The shockwave hit. My mother's face didn't register guilt. It registered annoyance. She looked around, checking if anyone important was watching. You're lying, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. You are lying to ruin your sister's day because you are jealous. You have always been jealous. We never got an invitation. You never told us. You just want attention. Chloe rushed over, her eyes wide, playing the victim on cue. Julia, why are you doing this? Today is supposed to be about me. My father, Thomas, stepped in, his face reddening. If you sent invitations and we didn't respond, why didn't you call? You expect us to believe this nonsense? Because I trusted you, I said, my voice steady, betraying nothing. I trusted that if you wanted to be there, you would be. This is pathetic, my mother spat. Get out. You are making a scene. I'm not making a scene, I said, reaching into my clutch. I'm making a report. I pulled out my phone. I didn't look at them. I looked at the AV technician standing by the soundboard, a young guy I had tipped $100 earlier to give me access to the HDMI cable. You want the truth? I asked, plugging the cable into my phone. Let's look at the data. I connected my phone to the system. The giant LED screens flanking the dance floor flickered, replacing the slideshow of Chloe's engagement photos with my phone's interface. The room went silent, 300 heads turning toward the glowing screens. I'm a structural engineer, I said, my voice amplified by the silence. But before that, I was the IT department for this family. 6 years ago, I set up the private cloud server that backs up every device in the house. I set it to auto-sync deleted files because Mom kept erasing her contacts by accident. Chloe's eyes went wide. She looked at the screen, then at her phone, then at me. You never changed the settings, Chloe. I tapped the screen. A video file opened. It was time-stamped 8 months ago. The audio boomed through the high-end speakers, Chloe's voice, clear and mocking. On the screen, Chloe was sitting at her vanity, holding a pen. She was laughing into the camera, filming a story draft she never posted but forgot to permanently delete. Okay, take 20. Video, Chloe said, holding up my wedding invitation. Look at this. Please join us in the mountains. As if I'm going to fly to Denver to watch Julia marry some nerd in a barn. The guests gasped. My mother put a hand over her mouth. On screen, Chloe picked up a piece of heavy cream cardstock. Watch this. She giggled. She started writing, narrating as she went. Dear Julia, we will not be attending. We want nothing to do with you. Do not contact us again. She held the fake letter up to the camera, admiring her work. It looks exactly like her handwriting. I practiced all morning. Mom and Dad are going to be so hurt when they receive this. They'll never forgive her. Then, the kill shot. Video Chloe ripped my actual invitation in half and tossed it into the trash can next to her desk. Oops, she smiled, winking at her reflection. Looks like the mail got lost. Enjoy your pathetic little life, Jules. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the tent was heavy, suffocating. It wasn't just shock, it was repulsion. The veil had been lifted. The golden child wasn't just spoiled. She was malicious. That's a lie, Chloe shrieked, her voice cracking. It's a deepfake. She made it with AI. She's jealous. It's not AI, I said calmly. It's metadata. The file was created on your device, uploaded from your IP address, on the date the invitation was delivered. My father, Thomas, stood frozen. He looked at Chloe, then at the screen, then at me. For the first time in his life, he couldn't deny the evidence. He couldn't spin it. His perfect daughter had forged a document to destroy his relationship with his other child. But that's not all, I said. I wasn't just your IT support. I was your safety net. I swiped to the next file a bank statement. 3 years ago, Chloe maxed out her credit cards trying to keep up her influencer lifestyle. $45,000 in debt. She was going to be sued. I highlighted a line item. A transfer of $45,000 from my savings account to the credit card company. I paid it off, I said to my parents. Anonymously. Because I didn't want you to be embarrassed. I didn't want the family name dragged through collections courts. I emptied my savings to protect the image you care so much about. The murmur in the crowd grew louder. Phones were out now, recording. The guests weren't just watching a drama, they were witnessing an execution. Then, Julian stood up. The groom. The man Chloe had just married. He looked pale, his jaw set in a hard line. He walked over to the microphone stand, taking it from the stunned MC. Is this true? He asked Chloe. His voice echoing. Baby? She's crazy. Is it true? He roared. Chloe flinched. It was just a joke. I didn't think. A joke, Julian repeated. He looked at me, then back at Chloe. You forged a letter to cut your sister off from her family. You lied about your debt. You lied about everything. He took a deep breath, and the cold, businesslike demeanor of a venture capitalist took over. I'm not just your husband, Chloe, he said into the mic. I'm the primary angel investor for your lifestyle brand launch next month. $3 million of seed funding. Chloe's face went gray. Julian, please. I am activating the moral turpitude clause in our contract, he said, his voice ringing with finality. Effective immediately, I am pulling all funding. The launch is cancelled. The brand is dead. He took off his wedding ring and placed it on the table next to the cake. And so is this marriage. I will not build a life with a fraud. He walked out of the tent without looking back. The sound of Chloe's wail was the only thing that filled the vacuum he left behind. It was a sound of pure, selfish devastation. I unplugged my phone. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just walked out the side exit, past the stunned waiters, past the security guards who didn't know who to stop. Caleb was waiting for me by the car. He opened the door, and we drove away from the ocean, leaving the wreckage in the rearview mirror. For 3 days, I stayed in a hotel room in the city, ignoring the digital mushroom cloud that was my former life. I didn't check social media, but I knew what was happening. Caleb's phone was buzzing nonstop with updates from friends. Chloe's brand deals were collapsing like dominoes. The lawsuit notifications were probably already piling up in her inbox. On the 4th morning, a courier arrived at the hotel lobby. He carried a thick, legal-sized envelope with the logo of my parents' real estate firm embossed in gold. I took it upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed. Caleb sat next to me, silent and steady. I opened the envelope. Inside was a check, a cashier's check for $60,000, and a document, a non-disclosure agreement. Attached was a handwritten note from my father, Thomas. The handwriting was jagged, angry. "Julia, take this. It covers the debt you paid and a bonus. Sign the NDA. Stop destroying your sister. We need this to end. This is a family matter. $60,000. To them, it was hush money. To me, it was an insult. They still thought this was a transaction. They thought my pain had a price tag, and that price was a little more than a mid-range SUV. They still didn't understand that currency had no value in the economy of betrayal. I looked at the check, the blue security patterns, the watermarks, the cold, hard numbers. I thought about the years I spent fixing their computers, balancing their books, hiding their secrets, paying their golden child's debts. I thought about the empty chairs at my wedding, and then I felt it. I waited for the rage. It didn't come. There was only a vast, quiet indifference. It was the feeling of walking out of a house you used to live in and realizing you left nothing behind. I didn't hate them. Hate takes energy. Hate is a connection. I felt nothing. They were just people I used to know, strangers who shared my DNA but none of my history. "Do you want to cash it?" Caleb asked softly. "No," I said. "I want to close the account." I took the check in both hands. The paper felt heavy, expensive. I ripped it down the middle. The sound was sharp, satisfying. I ripped it again and again, until the $60,000 was nothing but blue and white confetti on the hotel bedspread. I picked up my phone. I took a photo of the pile of torn paper. Then I opened the family group chat, the one I had muted for 8 months. It was full of frantic messages from my mother, threats from Chloe, demands from my father. I uploaded the photo. I typed one sentence. "My silence isn't for sale. It's free, because I'm done." I hit send. Then I left the group, blocked their numbers, and put the phone down. I turned to Caleb. "Let's go home." 7 months later, I was back in Denver. It was a Tuesday evening, chaotic and warm. I was sitting at a long wooden table in Caleb's parents' backyard. The air smelled of charcoal and roasted peppers. Caleb's nieces were chasing the dog through the sprinkler, shrieking with joy. His brother was arguing good-naturedly with his father about the best way to grill corn. There was no crystal, no white linen, no hushed tones or practiced smiles. It was loud, messy, and real. I sat there, watching them, feeling a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't the tightness of anxiety I used to feel at my parents' house. It was a settling, a grounding. Caleb's mother, Maria, sat down next to me. She was wiping her hands on a dish towel, her face flushed from the heat of the kitchen. "You're quiet tonight, Julia," she said, nudging my shoulder. "Thinking about work?" "No," I said. "Just..." She looked at me, her eyes softening. She knew the story. Caleb had told them everything after the Hamptons. They hadn't pitied me, they had simply made space for me. An extra chair at the table, a stocking on the mantel at Christmas. "Different good or different bad?" she asked. "Different good. It feels safe." Maria reached into her pocket. "I have something for you. I was saving it for a special occasion, but tonight feels right." She pulled out a small, worn velvet pouch. Inside was a silver locket, tarnished with age but beautiful. "This was my grandmother's," she said, placing it in my hand. "She brought it over from Italy. It's not worth a fortune, like the things your parents value, but it holds history." I looked at the locket, then at her. "Maria, I can't take this. It's a family heirloom." "You are family," she said firmly, closing my fingers over the silver. "Listen to me, Julia. DNA makes you relatives. Showing up makes you family. You show up. You love my son. You help us fix the fence. You make the best lasagna. You are here." Tears pricked my eyes. Not the hot tears of betrayal, but the warm, healing tears of acceptance. Thank you, I whispered. You don't have to thank me, she said, kissing my cheek. Just wear it. Later that night, Caleb and I drove home. The city lights of Denver sprawled out below us, a grid of electricity and life. You okay? He asked, glancing at me. Yeah, I said, touching the locket around my neck. I am. I thought about my biological family. I heard through the grapevine that my parents had been forced to downsize, selling the Hamptons estate to cover legal fees and debts. Chloe's lifestyle brand never launched. She was trying to rebrand as a wellness coach on a new platform, but the internet has a long memory. I didn't feel happy about their downfall. I didn't feel sad. I just felt distant from it, like reading a news story about strangers. The next morning, I was on a job site. I stood on the steel skeleton of a new high-rise, looking out at the mountains. The wind whipped my hair, but the structure beneath my feet was solid. I thought about foundations, how they are buried deep underground, invisible to the world. Yet they hold up everything. My parents had built a life on a foundation of image, and it had crumbled. I had built mine on truth, on hard work, on the people who chose to stay. I took out my phone. I went to my contacts. I scrolled down to mother, father, Chloe. I didn't hesitate. I hit block, then block, then block. It wasn't an act of war. It was the final item on a punch list. The project was complete. The old structure was condemned. I put my phone away, adjusted my hard hat, and turned back to the work. I had a skyscraper to build. If you've ever had to build your own family from scratch, share this story. You are the architect of your own peace.